Hey, welcome to Feedback Def. I'm Sabby Arcade, the apostate music journalist, and I'm thrilled because Wilco or None Such Records has just released a super deluxe box set edition reissue of Wilco's album A Ghost Is Born. I'll say off the bat, do I think this 9 CD or 9 LP plus 4 CD big giant box set is essential? Not exactly, but do I think it contains many, many lovely moments that shed light on the original album? Absolutely. So, A Ghost Is Born is Wilco's fifth proper studio album. It is the first without lead guitarist Jay Bennett, and it is the follow-up to Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, which to this day remains their highest selling album and is undoubtedly their most celebrated and most widely documented. There's a legend around Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, which ends up running into the story of making this album. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, it's been talked about almost to death. There's the documentary I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, which drops in on the band in the making of and the finishing and the aftermath of Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. So I mean, it's all there. And then there's Greg Kott's book Learning How to Die. There's tons and tons and tons of articles. And that's not to insinuate that the story is overblown or anything like that. It is a really amazing story. To sum it up quickly, Wilco are making this album that is more experimental than anything they've done in the past, although they had been on this track pretty much since Jay Bennett joined the band. The 3 albums he did with them, Being There, Summer Teeth, and Yankee Hotel, all very much utilize the studio and recording and this sort of angular, sort of warped, very conceptual approach to the idea of recording. And they all do that in different ways. But Yankee Hotel in particular falls in line with whatever it was that Radiohead were going off into with Kid A. Wilco were on a parallel track with Yankee Hotel. There's this sense of going off the cliff into like a digitized existence, and the blurring between like sonic, organic atmospheres. That's a bird tapping the bird feeder. That's awesome. Sonic, organic atmospheres, like a blue jay tapping the bird feeder. And these digital soundscapes that are like not very human sounding, but somehow they thread together in this really amazing way that is both beautiful in the case of both records, but also like revolutionary. That's what Yankee Hotel Foxtrot is. So it was originally scheduled for a September 11th release, and they were on the Warner Brothers subsidiary Reprise. They turned the record in. By this point, Jay Bennett is out of the band, and Warner Brothers is like, we want you to make some changes. We don't hear a single. This record is really kind of remote and kind of impenetrable to our record company ears. Jeff Tweedy's like, we're not changing the record. His manager at the time is like, no, we're not compromising. So then Reprise drops them. They leak the record online on purpose. They go tour. People start really getting behind this record. They're fans. They start really embracing this record. It becomes a cause celeb among journalists. And None Such Records, another subsidiary of Warner Brothers, buys the record and they pay twice as much for it, which is pretty awesome. So the record comes out in the spring of 2002. Okay. Along the way, because Wilco had mixed Yankee Hotel Foxtrot at Soma, which is John McIntyre of the band Tortoise's studio in Chicago. It's a very well-known studio in the Chicago indie avant-garde sphere. They come into contact with somebody that he had built the studio with named Michael Jorgensen, who is now a member of Wilco. Michael Jorgensen is like an electronic sort of bleep bloop glitch, um, tech gear guy who does a lot of sound manipulation, but he also plays piano, he plays organ, he plays guitar, he's a multi-instrumentalist, he writes songs. He is brought into Wilco as like a live, like in real time digital treatment guy to run certain sounds through effects and then run them back. And then eventually, first he's on the sidelines, and then eventually he finds his way on stage. And then they go back to Soma to start working on new material. So at the time, the band is Tweedy, co-founding bassist John Stewart, drummer Glenn Kochi, piano keyboardist, multi-instrumentalist Leroy Bach, and then Jorgensen. So that 5-piece lineup starts like taking stabs at this idea that Tweedy has of a concept album around Noah's Ark and all the different animals. They do a bunch of experimentation, which you hear on this box. There's actually 4 discs worth of the experimental jams they did at Soma alone. And then there's many versions, I don't want to say many, but there are several versions of the album as those songs are taking shape at Soma. So basically what you get with this box is the main record remastered, which I have issues with, which I'll get into. I don't like the remastering job, but you have the main record. Then you have a few different versions of the same set of songs over and over and over. So you have different snapshots of the record, sort of. Then you have 2 discs worth of live material with the lineup after this record. And then you have 4 discs worth of these, what they call fundamentals, where Tweedy would be playing in the main tracking room, and then the rest of them would be in the control room. All 4 of the other guys would be in the control room doing things along with his acoustic guitar playing and singing that he couldn't hear. So that's what this box set is. One thing you should know about all this material, all these extras, I'll read you from the credits. This is very good. Additional material from the Ghost is Born sessions has been issued on a few other releases. We have not repeated those versions on this set in order to allow for the inclusion of more unissued material, with 3 exceptions. Repeated tracks are marked with an and. Note, all tracks from the Wilco book CD appear on this set. However, they're mixed into the fundamentals discs. So that's good news. They were very careful not to just put a bunch of repeated stuff in here. Now, I would say, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't even one example of a song like Bob Dylan's 49th Beard or whatever that didn't make the record that I feel is like, oh wow, that should have been on there, or that matches the heights of the record for me. But like I said before, there are lots of moments, lots of little gems, needles in the haystack that make the set worthwhile, at the very least, to sit and pick through. I really like the way this sequence is laid out. One of the biggest challenges to making a box set is it enjoyable to sit down and listen to? And I feel like the Being There and Summer Teeth box sets, the deluxe editions, did that really well. I think they kind of dropped the ball on the Yankee Hotel box set, which was just so much material to cut through. It just felt overwhelming and exhausting, and it didn't feel like it had a flow. I'm talking about the extras. It just felt like hacking through this jungle of sound, and it felt like a lot of work to get through. This box set was done by the same people, Jeff Tweedy and Cheryl Pavelski, and boy, they really reined it in. And I think this is probably the most, as a sit-down listen, obviously not 9 discs at once, but take any of these and just sit down with them, and you have a really smooth, flowing, enjoyable listening experience. I think Tweedy and Cheryl did this so well on this set, and they really deserve, a round of applause for that. Now, part of what makes that possible, in my view, is that this album by far is the most gentle, the most sort of sublimely um, delicate record in Wilco's catalog. And yet it is very, very, very powerful at the same time. But there are so many songs, I'm talking about the main record now, so many parts where you're just like, wow, that's so soft, and there's a fragility there that is just absolutely gorgeous, in my opinion. Hummingbird, Muzzle of Bees, Handshake Drugs. Oh my goodness, Wishful Thinking. How could I forget that one? And that's just to name a few. Where you have these like sort of twinkling parts. There's multiple songs where there's two piano parts just kind of very gently call and responding with each other. Creates this sparkling effect. I mean, it's just, I would be hard pressed to think of another record. Well, let me put it this way. When I think of the records where being gentle equates to intense power, this is one of the ones that's like, in my top 10 list for that. So much of this album is restrained and reserved and doesn't intrude. It just sort of sits there and reveals its manifold gifts in so many ways. I mean, there is one, sort of hard driving, punkish kind of post-punky kind of tune. There's moments of guitar like explosiveness, but overall, this is a really, really, really graceful record. That's probably the one word that I would use above all to describe this album. And because of that, and because they pull it off so nicely, it's incredibly powerful. And I'm really, really pleasantly surprised at how, 20 plus years later, how much this album still holds up for me. I think the remastering job, unfortunately, rounds off the edges too much, so that on a song like Spider's Kid Smoke, where there's this like motoric kind of Kraftwerky kind of just repetitive groove that the band is in for like, minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes. It's like hypnotizing you. At a certain point, the band crashes in after all that repetition. The remastering just softens the blow too much, right? You already had something perfect. It's telling that Kid A and Amnesiac, when Radiohead re-released those as a box set, they didn't remaster them. They just was like, nope, that's what those records are. We're not even fucking touching them. And I think that should have been done here. But okay. Then you get into the extras. Like I said, there's several, I think 3 more iterations of the album in sequence. Some of these are really, really, really rough takes, but there's little like spots of gold in the hay. You're like, oh wow. And while I don't think you need to hear how this album came together to appreciate the finished work, I don't think any of this takes away from the finished work. It doesn't feel like work to listen to it. It's like watching a house being built or something. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. As far as the fundamentals go, John Stewart says, like when he would go back and listen to what they did during that process, he's like, there wasn't anything that we kept. But I got stoned and listened to it, and it was, I forgot the word he used. It was like giddy or something. That's about what you can expect here. And to see that lineup, which only lasted a very brief time, kind of exploring each other, I thought it's, you owe it to yourself to sit down with it once. And again, it isn't anything that you would go, man, this is total throwaway garbage. Like, I don't see the point why I'm sitting here. Each of those jams lasts about a half hour, And there's, like I said, moments of gold in there. And you get to hear how, oh, this is the band improvising. How did they get from there to then taking Jeff Tweedy's songs and turning them into what they turned them into? If you're a fan of Leroy Bach, as I am, he really leaves his fingerprints on this record in beautiful ways. This was a great note for him to go out on. He decides to leave. He doesn't tour behind the record. And then Jeff Tweedy brings in Pat Sansone and Nels Cline to then be the touring band for this album. And then that's the lineup of Wilco that has lasted ever since. So that lineup of Wilco has been around for 21 years without a hitch. And unfortunately for me, as much as I like Nels Cline outside of Wilco, for some reason it just doesn't gel for me in Wilco. So the live stuff you hear on this album is the Pat Sansone, Nels Cline lineup, and I don't know what it is. He's such an interesting guitar player, and here he's just kind of utilized in this very specific way that I think is too heavy-handed. And unfortunately for me also, the lead guitar work that Jeff Tweedy recorded on the record, after hearing Nels Cline do it, it kind of soured me on some of that stuff. But I will say that this live recording, as far as I'm concerned, captures the fragility of this material much closer than the live album they put out in '05 called Kicking Television. I don't know what it is. This mix is a little bit more restrained. It's not quite as immediate. It's a very, very refined mix, which I like, but it's like the whole band is a little bit further away and toned down a little bit, which I really, really enjoy. It fits the record better, in my view. So I would argue that this is Wilco's last classic. Now, again, that's totally subjective. I wouldn't argue against that with anybody else. I really, really like Sky Blue Sky. And some of their sort of recent stuff I really, really like as well. But I feel that once they settled into this lineup and there was no interpersonal friction within the band, the sound overall got a little too comfortable for me. There isn't enough of the psychic challenge that I think music benefits from. Now, in terms of psychic challenge, oddly enough, you may not hear it if you didn't know this about the record, about A Ghost Is Born. This is Jeff Tweedy's lowest point in his life. If you read his autobiography, it's here in the liner notes by Bob Mayer. Man, I mean, it starts off with him saying, I thought I was going to die. Like, he legit, while making this record, once they moved from Soma to Sear Sound in New York City, where they brought Jim O'Rourke on board to actually produce the record, just reading his description from his autobiography, it's like, wow, man, that is heavy. Like, the state he was in, physically, emotionally, psychologically, addictions-wise. I mean, he was having semi-hallucinatory, like, brain, like the CD was skipping in his brain in a way that is, like, really, really scary to read about. And to be able to hold it together and pull through and make this record, they even had to delay the release once it was finished so he could go to rehab and deal with his addiction and anxiety issue at like a dual treatment center. Whew. It doesn't really show in obvious, or it's certainly not obvious. Like all that turmoil, all that internal despair, you really have to kind of train your eye to find it, and it doesn't color the presentation, the rendering of the music, like the delivery of the music. You don't have to know that for this music to connect with you. But I do think it gives it a color, a basis, I keep coming back to this word, but a fragility, a personal vulnerability and openness, and just being sort of knocked down so much to the point you're at rock bottom and there's nothing to kind of do but let the light in. I think that does permeate this music in a way that makes it all the more powerful. And because Tweedy got better, turned a corner in his life, and then turned a corner in the band also, and reached this point of stability, I think the music hasn't. There's been something missing for me all along, so that's why I would say this is their last classic. Oddly enough, I think the stuff he's done on his own with his son is kind of very pleasant, just acoustic-y, guitar-y, kind of singer-songwriter-y stuff has been really, really, really moved me, right? And that stuff feels really casual, a lot of it. But within the framework of a band, of everything that this band can do musically, I just haven't felt as much heat since this process, and the way all of that heat and friction and turmoil and despair and lack of hope and mental illness really is what, if you read the description, that's really what was going on here. The way all of that just kind of flutters down like snowflakes on the surface of this music is just lovely. So I would recommend you check out this box set. Now, I would recommend caution before you shell out, whatever it costs. But the liners are really, 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 really well done. I don't love the remastering job, but you could have the original CD, wherever, if you still have it. If you are a completist, this is certainly worth having. Like I said, it is, for me, the most start to finish enjoyable listen of the bunch. And that's saying a lot because I really, really, really like the Being There and Summer Teeth box sets. But this is very sensibly put together in spite of it being so much, like a lot to digest. Like you definitely don't want to sit, you're going to give yourself a headache, trying to tackle this whole thing at once. It's not possible. Interestingly, Tweedy was suffering from migraines a lot, which you see in the movie I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, and it's covered in the liner notes here. And I had a migraine, and I was in the post-drome recovery stage, like after the pain was all gone, and I was just kind of tired out. And that's what I listened to, this box set, mostly in that state. And I was like, it's not bad for that. It demands so little of you that you could be kind of crumpled up and needing chicken soup and still sit down with this, and it works even when in that kind of state of disrepair. So those are my thoughts on the Super Deluxe 20th anniversary reissue of A Ghost is Born by Wilco. I would love to know what you think about this record and the reissue job and pretty much anything else about Wilco that you want to talk about. For Feedback Def, I'm Sabby Reyes Kulkarni, the apostate music journalist. Over and out.